Hey, what's up guys? Welcome along to the channel. So today we're going to talk about a massive fight in the lightweight standings that's just happened at UFC 289 this past weekend. Charles Oliveira with a really impressive victory over Beneil Dariush. So this bout was it was very impactful for the division. It's going to do a lot for the title picture. We're going to discuss that over on my Instagram. If you can find me at BJJ_Browner. I did a very brief breakdown of what made the difference in this fight, and the problem with Instagram breakdowns is that you can only fit a very tiny amount in there, so you got to focus on maybe the one or two things that made the most difference. In today's video, we might just take a look at the fight in a little more depth. Now, it was a very short fight, so there won't be a hell of a lot to break down. We're not going to be here all day, but we're going to look at just some of the details that, for me, just showed what a great fighter Charles Oliveira really is. I mean, we're going to talk about where he stands in the pantheon of greats as well going forward, and he's out there on his own now at the top of the leaderboard for finishes in the UFC. His record now is 34-9. He's got 22 UFC victories and he's finished 20 of those. That's insane. That's a ridiculous amount. The other thing with that is that he's finished with a variety of methods. So, he's not just a dangerous grappler. This fight was a really good indication of that. It was a really good showcase of his well-roundedness. I also did a brief breakdown last week of the defensive grappling capabilities of Beneil Dariush, and I was explaining in the video why I thought that might be a factor, because his last bout against Mateusz Gamrot, who's a brilliant grappler himself, Beneil showed great capabilities in, not allowing his opponent to establish really dominant grips. So Beneil is not a very fast, athletic guy. He's at a little bit of a disadvantage against other fighters in that division in that respect, but he is very savvy on the mat and in the cage, and when someone is a little faster than him and they can maybe connect to his hips, he reacts very well. He grip fights very well, and he stops them fully connecting their hands around a double leg, a single leg. He has really good reactions to create scrambles, never allows you to secure a position even if you do get him down. He doesn't allow you to get chest to chest. He doesn't allow you to connect to his head. So I wondered last week before the fight happened, would that be enough? Get Charles Oliveira into deep waters, because when opponents get tired, as Gamrot did, Beneil then starts to be able to manage the range better. He's a slow twitch fighter, and he can then walk tired opponents into danger, and he did that with Gamrot in round 3. He walked him onto, he's a southpaw, so he walked him onto a beautiful left hand and dropped him on his ass. So I wondered if that was going to be the factor, but the issue is that Charles has really impressive Muay Thai skills. He's a dynamic striker, well-rounded, very technical, and he's got that killer blow. So sure enough, the power and the speed of Charles was just too much for Beneil in this bout. I mean, Beneil came in there on an 8-fight win streak. He was really showing his own well-roundedness, but that little lack of explosivity and that lack of speed and sharpness, he just does not have that natural athleticism, and Charles made him pay. So we'll go through the fight. We'll break it down just step by step. As I said, it was a very brief fight, but we'll talk about like the key details, the key moments. Hopefully some of this makes sense to you. So they come out, Charles comes out in that orthodox stance, and he's against the southpaw in Dariush. So instantly Charles gets on his toes, gets in front of Dariush. For my mind, what he's trying to do is he's trying to impose that speed advantage, that sharpness. He's not giving Beneil a chance to settle into any type of rhythm and maybe dictate the distance here. So he goes straight away. He teases out those first 2 kicks. Neither of them are really thrown to land with any impact. One to the body, one to the inside leg, and it's just that right leg against the southpaw striker, and that's basically to gauge his distance. It's the third kick though, just about a minute and 15 into the fight, that was the key one for me. This is a combination that I absolutely love. I use this a lot myself, and what he's doing is he throws a 1-2 and the kick comes up behind the right hand. Now what he doesn't do is 1-2 down the middle and then settle and then throw the kick. What he does is he throws the 1, and as he throws the 2, he leans his head to the left as the arm is out there. That causes Dariush to lean to his left, and as the arm is pretty much still out there and about to come back, the kick comes up behind it before he's even pulled it back. So it's a really beautiful, sneaky combo, and it actually lands relatively flush, and it stuns Dariush for a moment. Now instantly Charles gets on that, and remember that little combination, because that comes back into play later in the fight in a really significant way. But Charles gets straight onto him and starts basically pressing the action and starts trying to land more damaging shots, because he senses, I'm after rocking this guy. They kind of get too close at one point, they clinch, Charles sticks a knee up the middle to the body, and they end up against the fence. And at that point now we see a little bit more intricacy stuff in the grappling. Beneil turns Charles, so Charles has his back to the fence, but Charles reaches around, links his hands, gets that body lock, and what he does with the underhook that he has, he drives it upwards, which allows him to rotate Beneil. And as Beneil is rotating, Charles takes this sticky foot, where he takes the instep of his foot and tries to trip Beneil as they're rotating. Now the reason it doesn't work is they're not rotating with enough momentum. So Charles kind of goes for it, but any judo guy will tell you, if you're going to throw someone, you got to throw them while they're moving, while they're off balance. That's why judo looks so effortless when you see it executed perfectly. So Charles kind of goes for it, but doesn't really fully 100% commit. Basically, Beneil has sort of set his base down a little, so he sort of hits a brick wall with that attempt. Now the problem with it is he has 1 foot off the floor, so when Beneil pushes his weight forward into Charles, Charles naturally just falls back. He still has a hold of Beneil. He does well though as he falls back. He basically, instead of landing and pulling Beneil onto mount, he manages to get one leg just inside like a butterfly, and then he uses that elevation to get his other knee in across the body like a knee shield. So when they do hit the floor, Charles has this knee shield half guard position, and he gets into a nice safe position here in that transition. So that's a high level black belt. Just in a transition like that, when something's gone wrong, you can recover a really good position. That comes with, you know, countless thousands of hours on the mat and time on the mat. And once they're in that half guard position, he's got that knee shield and he's staying safe. He kind of reaches a hand under like he's trying to fish for deep half guard entry possibly. Beneil does the right thing, kind of lifts his hips to defend that, and this next moment is really just invisible jiu-jitsu, tiny details. The moment he just half lifts his hips to defend, Charles pushes the knee and recovers full guard, and that's just again those sneaky little transitions that you would only see the really high level guys make. That sharpness, you don't have to fight then to recover your guard, it's just the timing. Everything is about timing. The higher you go through the grades in a sport like jiu-jitsu or MMA, the longer you're training, the smaller those details, those fine margins become, and it was really beautiful. So Charles gets that close guard. Beneil then goes to work, starting to try to land ground and pound, and I think the commentary were kind of saying, you know, something about Charles losing the fight, but for me, Beneil isn't really landing any of the shots. Charles is defending very well. He keeps this lovely high guard up on one side while grip fighting with the other hand. So Beneil is struggling to punch around that arm. And on those moments in between Beneil's punches, he throws hammer fists from his back, and he even lands a few impactful shots himself. And it's pretty impressive. When Beneil does posture up to try to throw, Charles moves well and he makes Beneil miss quite a little bit. So it's really good defensive awareness in that ground and pound position by Charles, and very impressive. Again, in all elements of this fight, he looked the more impressive fighter, which is really good for me to watch, because it's, you know, the guy he's against is no slouch. As I said, he makes Beneil miss. At one point he kind of goes for a single leg X guard and then slides a foot across for a reap, and he rolls. They talked about him trying to isolate a heel hook. It's more like he goes for a belly down footlock, but it's a good like low risk attempt, because it's not like you're rolling under the guy to try and footlock him and you're there to be hit. He basically rolls and you're going belly down, so your face is quite a bit away from your opponent when you do this. He fishes for it and it ain't there. Beneil kind of gets up, clears the knee line, and Charles just recovers close guard straight away. So again, good experience on the mat just shows. He realises something isn't there, so he doesn't keep chasing it and get himself into a more vulnerable position. There's a couple of moments where Beneil tries to get up and pass and doesn't really get there, and then they recover close guard. And again, another point where he gets up, Charles throws out an up kick. There's a tiny moment of separation, and Charles does great just to push him away with the feet and get back to his feet. Now this is where the fight turns on its head completely. They push towards the fence. There's a moment of a bit of a stalemate, although Charles lands a bit of an elbow in the clinch, and then it's like they instantly both decide to just separate for a moment. Charles takes a moment to reset and then steps back in again. Now they're standing, and remember the punch head kick combo that we talked about earlier. Charles touches his left hand out there just to gauge the distance, and as soon as he feels that lead right arm of Beneil, he throws the straight right, leans off, again causes Beneil to slip his straight right, and the head kick came up behind it, and it really stunned Beneil this time. So it was again just, he goes straight back to the well with that technique that worked so well at the start of the fight. Here we are 3 minutes later, and it's found a home again. That's twice he's landed that really sharp, sneaky head kick hidden behind the straight right. At that point, Beneil is in trouble, and Charles senses it. And he just steps forward and starts really trying to rain down bombs on him, and starts trying to smash his opponent into submission. So Beneil finds himself against the fence, and he definitely, at least one of those right hands landed. There's another one comes in, and it kind of brushes off the back of his ear as he drops it, almost like a panic shot. He drops to try and grab he's in front of Charles, but he drops to try and grab Charles's left leg. Charles has kind of squared up his stance a little bit at the moment. And this next transition is beautiful. Beneil goes to grab that left leg. Charles basically backsteps with the right leg, rolls around him, and drops his weight at the same time. So he almost drops down beside him in a sort of attacking the turtle guard position, and instantly then tries to grab the back. He tries to grab the neck and step over to take the back. Beneil, as Beneil does, and he did it against Gamrot a few times, that split second he senses danger, he tries to roll under and invert, and Charles does very well here. His weight surfs across the hips of Beneil, so he actually stays in the top position and just lands on his knees on the other side. At this point, I think Beneil is physically done. He's still, he's trying not to quit, but Charles just has a dominant position, and the will to scramble, the ability to scramble has kind of been beaten out of Beneil at this stage. The ground and pound comes down, and Jason Herzog steps in, and that's all she wrote. It's such an impressive victory, just for all of those tiny little details. For me, as a fan of all the little technical idiosyncrasies, I think is the word I'm looking for. It was just amazing to watch, and it highlighted to me how good Charles is, that he could be always a step ahead of an opponent as impressive as Beneil Dariush. So I mean, going forward, we got to talk about where that leaves him in the title picture. I know Dana, the man who doesn't ever make fights at post-fight press conferences, was then saying something that it might be him against Makhachev again, and you just can't take anything Dana says with you got to take it with a pinch of salt, don't you? So it'll be interesting to see what they do actually do. The big fight that's coming up is Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje. Poirier has only lost to Khabib and Charles in his last 11 fights. He's a superstar, he's a name. Of course, he has those wins over McGregor, which will have added to his name value. And outside of those losses to Khabib and Charles, he's looked outstanding in this weight class. If he was to win, there's a conversation there for him getting the title shot, Gaethje is 2-2 in his last 4 fights, so his form not as stellar. His 2 losses have come to the same 2 fighters there as Poirier's. Although, as I said, Poirier's was spread out over a longer period. So Gaethje has lost to Khabib and Charles, but I think the issue there is that Gaethje was submitted with relative ease by both fighters, and I don't know if they're going to be reluctant to put him in a title picture against a grappler of the quality of Islam Makhachev. For me, I think they're hoping Poirier might win. If they do give Charles the title shot, you would imagine if Poirier was to win this one, he would be next in line. Are they going to give Gaethje another crack at Charles if Charles wins the title? So there's decisions to be made going forward there. But we saw the reception that the Vancouver fans gave to Charles Oliveira. He's a well-loved fighter, and it's because of that exciting style. I mean, the sheer volume of finishes that he has in his UFC career. He's a likeable guy. There was talk of him not staying in this weight division, this lightweight weight division, wasn't there? He missed weight that time. Was it the Gaethje fight where he got the belt stripped and whatnot? Turned up at he weighed in at 154 this time. So maybe that's a little statement from him saying, hey, I ain't going anywhere, guys. So, he could be, he looks like he's got the bit between his teeth, and he really, really wants this belt back. So it would be a lovely story to see him go and claim it back. Whether he can do it against Islam Makhachev is another story. And the last question then is, where does he stand in the pantheon of greats? He's got the most finishes in UFC history. Is he the greatest finisher of all time? I mean, the fact that he's had so many fights obviously is he's up there with guys like Donald Cerrone and Michael Bisping at the top end of that list. So generally the people with the most fights are probably going to finish higher near the list. There might be arguments that someone like Francis Ngannou, who had far less UFC fights but was still probably an equally impressive finisher, there might be an argument that someone like him might take the title. But I think the variety of weapons with which Charles Oliveira can finish you. I mean, let's take a little nosy through a list of his wins here. He's got so many rear naked choke victories. I mean, we know he's a high level grappler. We know he's a dangerous finisher. Rear naked chokes, anacondas, arm triangles. Plenty of ground and pound finishes on there too. Left hook to ground and pound against Michael Chandler. Guillotine choke. Only 2 decision victories, and those were over Jeremy Stephens and Tony Ferguson. But I mean, let's be real. The armbar he had on Tony Ferguson probably finishes 99% of fighters anyway. Overhand right and uppercut against Jared Gordon. Right cross to ground and pound against Nick Lentz. Anaconda choke, rear naked choke. There was a calf slicer in there way back in the day. Who was that against? He also had a modified Peruvian choke against Hatsu Hiyoki. Lots of impressive submission victories. The calf slicer, of course, against Eric Wisely. Darce choke against Brookins. Over his career, Oliveira has had plenty of finishes as well, you know, strikes and stuff. So he is quite a well-rounded, dangerous fighter. Let me know what you guys think. I'm going to leave it here, but what I want you guys to do is let me know in the comments what you think. Is he the greatest finisher of all time in the UFC or in MMA in general? Last thing, if you could follow the channel, like the video, share it in as many places as possible. This would be great. I'm going to be doing plenty more of these going forward. Go to the Instagram page, BJJ_Browner, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.